Hello, lords and ladies of the internet. I'm the King of Candor, and today I'm going to be talking about how Warhammer 40k has made the laziest retcon I've ever seen. I'm also going to talk about how they really should have done this, but a few things before we get started. I'm almost always against retcons of any kind. That said, I recognize that sometimes they have to happen, but I don't like them overall. With that being said, what Games Workshop has done recently is bafflingly stupid. So a little context for those of you who don't know. Warhammer 40k is a tabletop miniature battle game that was first released in 1987. Back then, it had a lot more role-playing game elements than today, but the goal was still to command armies and squads and lead them to victory. The setting is described as grimdark, basically meaning it has a very depressing and oppressive place, with humanity under siege from dozens of other powerful factions. The core of this defense are the Imperial Guard, soldiers from all across the Imperium of Man that fight to protect it. Working alongside them are super soldiers known as Space Marines, who are given organ modifications, enhanced training, and special weapons, the best in the galaxy, to protect humanity. Space Marines are an all-male faction due to the body modifications requiring such specific and intense work. For females who wish to serve the Emperor, you can turn to the Sisters of Battle. All of these factions are monitored by the Inquisitors, who are both male and female, and make sure everybody is working towards the glory of the Emperor. You see, the Emperor is currently wounded and is sitting on his throne, healing and guiding humanity with his mind magic. To protect him, we have the Custodes, that are the sons of the noble houses, given modifications and even better armor and weapons than the Space Marines. Up until a few weeks ago, this is roughly how the factions worked. However, in their never-ending attempt to ruin their own property, Games Workshop has attempted to stealthily alter the lore for the Custodes, adding a female hero unit to the upcoming book. This was noticed by fans, one of which asked on the official X, formerly Twitter account, if this was a typo, and they responded with, "Since the first of the 10,000 were created, there have always been female Custodes." This was absolutely wild to witness. This is literally some, "there is no war in Ba Sing Se," or "we've always been at war with East Asia," or "there are 5 lights" type of post. It reeks of both laziness and dismissiveness in a way that has rightfully angered many fans. They even doubled down on the insanity recently with the "everything is canon" post. I know personally I'm not going to buy any more Warhammer products after this, but I want to use this as a teaching moment for others. This specific instance was handled horribly, and I think the retcon is done for political reasons instead of to tell of a good story, which is at the heart of the issue. They didn't have their heart in it, and they just phoned it in. The current edition doesn't even have an updated Sisters of Battle rulebook. We don't have any female Imperial Guardsmen units and heroes, but instead they just took an all-male faction and added females instead of fleshing out the currently existing female factions. Before we get any further, if you like the content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video. You can also become a YouTube member now for $1, and you get some cool emotes you see everywhere on YouTube. Help the channel grow, and I can continue to make more videos. So back to the video. This got me thinking, assuming you have the right reasons, of course, how would you introduce a retcon or alter the lore in any way that isn't really terrible? I think the best example I could find is the removal of slavery from the 2nd edition of Pathfinder. Now, I will admit, I don't like this change as well. I think it was also done for political reasons, and I think they went too far too quickly. However, the way they did it is probably the best I've seen. They didn't go back in time and pretend slavery didn't exist, ignoring over a decade of modules that had you fighting against slavers. No. What they did is they moved the setting forward a decade or so, and during that time, several anti-slavery factions all managed to work together to create a massive continent-wide slave revolt. For what I've been told, they even had a god or two get involved on their side, with many massive wars fought over this. This is really cool, actually. It was a fun way to shake up this setting, and it's fully believable in the world. They didn't lie to the fans and make us pretend the old stuff didn't happen. No, it still did happen, but now we get to see them moving forward in the setting. All too often, I think settings are stagnant in IPs, which leads to a lot of sameness and takes otherwise interesting worlds and dilutes them to this point where it begins referencing itself and they don't even stay relevant. Disney Star Wars is very guilty of this. Almost everything is basically just after the original trilogy, with the follow-up stuff being so intrinsically tied to it, it's almost like a repeat. I will give them credit that the High Republic setting is in fact different, and it's much more focused on exploration and fantasy, but all the mainstream stuff is incredibly derivative. Especially if you look at something like the prequel trilogy that George Lucas made. The way the troopers looked there, the enemies weren't even just stormtroopers anymore. They were droids, which is totally different. The technology and factions are also different. Though they are related underneath, so that's a much more interesting way to adjust and move settings. I'm not saying Warhammer had to start a brand new era for this lore, but the way they did it still feels incredibly cheap and lazy. As I begin wrapping up, I want to list a couple of things that they could have done instead if they wanted to add female custodies that badly. I'm not saying these are incredibly well researched here, and there's a lot of problems with them considering they're altering the original lore unnecessarily, but these are just ideas to start with. The first is to have the sons of the nobles of Earth not be enough to fill the ranks of the custodies. This is the lamest one, but it's also simply the easiest. Instead of having men, they also find a formula that allows them to convert women into custodies. These women would all be new, and you could even say that they found it a while ago, but only began deploying them en masse recently. This still has a lot of issues, but at least allows you to keep the gene editing and nobility aspects of the faction intact. The second way you could have done this is with having females from the Imperial Guard, Sisters of Battle, or the Inquisition get promoted into it. I know that type of promotion doesn't typically happen, however, I think an exception can be made if you really want to make part of this lore in your setting. This does mean that there are lots of these ladies that are going to be brand new, so you can't pretend somebody's been around for decades, which is I think what they're trying to do. This also makes the lore too permeable, and it feels ill-advised in a way. The third way, and the one I think is most actually interesting, is inspired by this comic I'm going to put on screen by Mick Comics. He goes by Mick19988 on Twitter. Here, we see the Imperial Governor of the Palace. He sees one of these new female units and is confused. He asks what is going on, and he's threatened for his rudeness by the Custodes male. The female one says she will handle it, and it is revealed she's actually a demoness in disguise. I'm putting his post below, but the ending is great because it implies Tzeentch, the evil chaos god of change, was behind this, and if they made that canon, I think it would be fantastic. Tzeentch already does a lot of wild stuff in the setting and has plans within plans, so having him corrupt one so close to the Emperor so effectively that they didn't even notice the change would really speak to how close the Empire is to falling. You can even have it so this gets found out and they all get rooted out, but then they realize the female custodies are good enough to keep around, thus you have a storyline that permanently alters the faction and introduces women to it. These are just three basic thoughts that a layman came up with. The people are paying Games Workshop their millions of dollars in market share to come up with good stories for their plastic figurine game. I'm glad to see people rejecting them and their stock suffering. If only they could stop being so lazy and start writing good lore. That is all for today. Thank you for watching this far. If you enjoyed the content, I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. Let me know below if you can think of any other major retcons that didn't work terribly, like the Pathfinder 1 slavery removal. I would be curious if these things in these settings that I haven't seen have done them in a way that doesn't feel cheap and unearned. So I'm always curious for more things. I'm looking forward to your candor in the comments below. Have a great day. Don't worry, I'm still working on the Harpy video and the Hit Point video. They are going fantastically, but I just saw this crop up and it really bothered me because of how stupid and lazy it is. But I wanted to tell people a good way to do it. So, thank you.